The first time I stepped into that house, it felt like I was walking into someone else's memory. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet as if they were whispering secrets, and a faint smell of roses clung to the air though no flowers could be found. I had moved in because I needed a fresh start. My heart was tired, worn down from a relationship that ended with betrayal, and I thought an old house tucked away on a quiet street might give me peace. But peace is not what I found. From the very first night, I felt it. The air shifted as soon as the sun went down, heavy yet tender, like invisible hands pressing against my skin. I lay in bed trying to convince myself it was just the loneliness, that my mind was playing tricks. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. It started small, like the faint echo of footsteps when I was sure no one else was there. Sometimes I heard a soft sigh from the corner of the room, a sound so fragile it could have been mistaken for the house settling. But it wasn't the house. I began noticing colder spots too, patches of icy air drifting past my arms at night, brushing against me like the edge of a fingertip. I tried to laugh it off. I even told myself that old houses always had quirks, that the mind loved to exaggerate silence into something scarier. But one night, the illusion broke. I was lying in bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, when I felt the mattress dip beside me. The feeling was so real that I opened my eyes instantly, heart pounding, expecting to see someone sitting there. No one was visible. But the indent in the sheets was there. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, every hair on my body rising. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something else kept me still. A strange calm pushed back against my fear, like a quiet voice telling me not to be afraid. The night stretched on forever. My ears strained for any sound, my eyes searching every corner of the room for movement. Nothing came, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still lying beside me. That night, sleep never came. I kept replaying it in my mind, the undeniable sensation of another presence sharing the bed. The next morning, the room looked normal again, the sheets smooth as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I felt. The house was hiding someone, something, that wanted me to notice her. Days turned into weeks, and the strange events grew bolder. I would leave a book on the table only to find it open on a random page when I came back. A faint melody played sometimes, a soft hum like a woman's voice, drifting through the hallways though no radio or phone was on. The more I noticed, the less afraid I became. It was unsettling, yes, but also, oddly comforting. The loneliness that used to weigh me down began to fade. It was as if the house was alive, listening, paying attention to me in a way no one else ever had. At night, I found myself speaking into the empty air, whispering little things I couldn't tell anyone else. I spoke about my heartbreak, about how I felt unlovable, about how tired I was of pretending to be strong. I laughed at myself for it, but it also felt strangely healing. Someone was there, even if I couldn't see her. And maybe, just maybe, she was listening. Then came the night that changed everything. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart restless. That's when I heard it, my name. Soft, almost fragile, like a breath carried by the wind. It was so faint I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, closer this time, whispered right beside me. My whole body froze. My lips parted, trembling, and before I could stop myself I whispered back, "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence stretching out until I thought I might lose my mind. But just as my eyes began to close, exhausted, I felt it again, the bed sinking ever so slightly, as though someone had slipped under the covers beside me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but instead of fear, a strange warmth bloomed in my chest. It felt like I wasn't alone anymore, like I had been chosen, noticed. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just lay there, listening to the quiet breath that didn't belong to me, wondering why my loneliness suddenly felt a little less heavy. The days that followed felt like living in a strange dream I couldn't wake from, a dream that wrapped itself around me and whispered that I wasn't alone. I started noticing little things I couldn't explain, and instead of running, I leaned into them. One morning, I stepped out of the shower and found the mirror fogged up, the way it always does, but this time there were faint letters traced into the steam. Not full words, not clear at first, but lines that almost formed a shape. I wiped at it with my hand, and the letters blurred, but I could have sworn it was an attempt at my name. The strangest part was that instead of screaming, I smiled. Something inside me wanted to believe that someone was reaching out, not to scare me, but to be close. That night, I stayed awake later than usual, waiting. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels too loud, every tick of the clock echoing. I sat up in bed and whispered softly, "Are you here?" The air grew colder, just enough to raise goosebumps across my skin, but it wasn't a cruel cold. It was almost like a response, like a hand brushing along my arm. I didn't know why I wasn't afraid anymore. Maybe it was because I had been so lonely, because nights alone had become unbearable, and for the first time, I felt like someone was choosing to stay with me. The days grew heavier with anticipation. I caught myself leaving little notes on the nightstand with a pen and paper, just in case. Silly things, simple things. Did you mean to say my name, or what do you want? Sometimes when I came back to the room, the paper would be untouched, but one evening I returned and the pen had rolled to the floor, the page turned slightly as if someone had touched it. My heart beat so fast I had to sit down. I picked up the note, and though there were no words, there was the faintest mark, as if the tip of the pen had pressed into the paper without writing. It was enough to send a shiver through me, but also, enough to convince me I wasn't imagining all of this. I started talking out loud more often, sometimes while cooking dinner or folding laundry. I told the empty rooms about my day, about the small frustrations, about memories that weighed on me. It felt strange at first, like talking to myself, but then it started to feel like she was listening. I couldn't see her yet, but I could feel her. And then, one night, she answered. I had just turned out the light, curled beneath the blankets, when I whispered into the dark, "I wish I knew who you were." At first, only silence. My eyes grew heavy, but just before I drifted off, the faintest voice brushed against my ears. A woman's voice, soft, hesitant, but so close I could feel the breath of it. She whispered my name, clear as day. My eyes flew open, my body frozen. Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling but not from fear. The silence stretched long, until I thought she wouldn't answer again. Then, gently, as if it hurt to speak, came the reply, "Evelyn." I didn't move. My chest rose and fell so fast I thought I might break apart. The name echoed inside me, settling deep. Evelyn. I swallowed hard, trying to find words, but my throat was tight. Finally, I whispered, "Why are you here?" A pause, and then softer than before, almost mournful, "I don't want the bed to feel empty anymore." Tears stung my eyes, not because of fear, but because of how lonely her words sounded. Loneliness is something I understood far too well. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, heart aching for someone I couldn't see, someone who hadn't spoken to anyone in God knows how long. I whispered back into the darkness, "You don't have to be alone anymore." The air shifted, a warmth brushing over me despite the chill, and for the first time since moving into that house, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. I couldn't stop thinking about her name. Evelyn. It looped in my head like a song I couldn't forget, sweet and haunting, carrying weight I didn't understand yet. Every night after that first whisper, I called her by it, softly at first, afraid she wouldn't answer again. But she always did, her voice brushing against the air like silk, quiet but steady, like someone testing if I really wanted to hear her. I did. More than anything, I did. The nights grew longer, and my bed stopped feeling so empty. Sometimes, when I rolled over, I swore I felt the faintest dip beside me, like she was lying there, invisible but undeniably real. And then, slowly, she began to show herself. It wasn't sudden. It was in little things first, the flicker of a shadow in the corner of my eye when I looked away, the softest reflection in the mirror that didn't quite match my movements. Once, as I brushed my hair in the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of long dark hair falling behind me in the glass, but when I turned, there was no one there. My heart pounded, but not with fear. It was wonder, a strange kind of hope. She was trying. She wanted me to see her. And with every day that passed, I wanted it too. One night, I asked her how long she had been here. The silence stretched until I thought she might not answer, and then came her voice, so low it almost broke, "Since I died." The words hit me harder than I expected, a cold truth settling deep. I sat up in bed, pulling the blanket tighter around me. "What happened to you?" I whispered. For a long time, there was only the creak of the house, the groan of wood shifting in the night. Then, finally, she spoke, her words trembling like a confession. "I lived here. Long ago. This was my home. But my life ended before I could ever love who I wanted to love." My throat closed up. The ache in her voice was unbearable. I pressed my hand flat against the sheets, wishing she could take it, wishing she could feel that someone was listening. "Who did you want to love?" I asked softly. The room went still, heavy with unspoken truths. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she whispered, "A woman." But it wasn't aloud. I was afraid. I lived and died with the fear. My chest tightened, tears burning the corners of my eyes. The pain in her words mirrored the pieces of my own heart, the way I had hidden, the way I had been broken because I loved a woman who chose someone safer, easier, someone the world wouldn't question. We sat in silence for a long time, me breathing hard in the dark, her presence filling the space beside me like a soft weight. I wanted to tell her I understood, that she wasn't alone in that pain. Instead, I whispered, "You deserved more than that. You deserved to love and be loved." The air shifted suddenly, a rush of warmth so intense it made my skin prickle. I didn't see her face, not fully, but in the mirror across the room, the faintest outline appeared, a silhouette of a woman standing near the bed, her head tilted toward me. My breath caught, and I whispered her name. Evelyn. She lingered there, faint and wavering, but enough for me to feel the truth settle deep inside me. She wasn't just a voice, not just a ghost. She was someone who had been denied everything she longed for. And in the quiet of that room, she was reaching for me. I should have been terrified. A part of me knew it didn't make sense to feel anything but fear wasn't what filled me. What filled me was tenderness, an ache, a longing I couldn't explain. My heart beat faster not because of danger but because I wanted to be close to her, to comfort her, to let her know her story didn't have to end in silence. That night, I lay awake long after her reflection faded, staring into the dark, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt connected. I felt seen. And as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, I was falling in love with someone I wasn't even supposed to believe existed. Nights with Evelyn began to stretch into conversations that felt like lifelines. I would lie on my side, eyes half closed, speaking into the shadows as if they were flesh and bone, and she would answer with that soft voice that slipped between silence and breath. The more we talked, the more she began to open herself, and the more I began to unravel in front of her. I told her things I had never told anyone, things about how I still woke up sometimes and reached for a woman who had left me, how the emptiness of her absence clung to me like a second skin. Evelyn listened. She never interrupted, never judged, only answered when she wanted to remind me I wasn't alone. It was strange, but her silence healed me more than any words had. I found myself laughing again too. Sometimes she would tease me in small ways, like knocking a book from the shelf when I forgot where I put it or brushing against my hair when I complained about bad mornings. The house no longer felt haunted in the terrifying sense, it felt lived in, alive. But then, one evening, as the cold seeped in through the old windows and the moonlight painted the walls silver, Evelyn asked for something that stopped my breath. "Can I lie in your bed?" Her voice was softer than ever, but the question carried weight. My heart stumbled. My first instinct was to freeze, to cling to the part of me that feared the unknown. Sharing a bed with something not of this world sounded like crossing a line I could never come back from. "Evelyn," I whispered, my fingers curling around the blanket. "I don't know if that's right." The room grew still. I could feel her retreat, the air growing colder as if my hesitation pushed her away. Panic rose in my chest, and I hurried to add, "It's not that I don't want you close. I don't know what it means." Silence stretched between us. I pressed my lips together, my chest aching at the thought of hurting her. And then, I felt it, the faintest touch against my hand, so light it could have been imagined, but warm, undeniably warm. "I don't want to scare you," she whispered. "I just don't want to feel like a shadow anymore." The pain in her voice broke me. I closed my eyes, letting out a shaky breath. "Then stay," I whispered. "Stay with me." The mattress dipped ever so slightly, like someone had lain down beside me, the sheets pulling just enough to brush against my hip. My heart raced, my body trembling, but it wasn't fear, it was something far deeper. I turned onto my side, facing the empty space, and whispered, "You're here, aren't you?" A wave of warmth rolled through the air, wrapping around me like an embrace. I could almost feel the outline of her body beside mine, the suggestion of a shoulder, the faint weight of a hand resting near mine. My throat tightened, tears slipping free without permission. I hadn't realized how badly I needed this, the closeness, the comfort, the reminder that even in the strangest, most impossible form, I was wanted. That night, sleep came slower than usual. My thoughts twisted in directions I didn't want to admit. What did it mean that I longed for her touch? That I craved the warmth of someone I couldn't even fully see? It should have scared me, but instead, it gave me something to hold on to, something realer than the emptiness I'd lived with for so long. Before I drifted into sleep, Evelyn whispered again, her voice so tender it felt like it sank into my bones. "I think I'm falling in love with you." My breath caught. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words tangled in my throat, and all I managed was a whisper back, "I think I'm falling too." And though her body wasn't there in the way I wished it could be, the bed no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep with loneliness pressing against me. I fell asleep with love. The days that followed felt like living inside a secret that belonged only to us. I would wake in the mornings with the faint scent of roses lingering on the air, the kind of fragrance that didn't belong in a house with no flowers. Sometimes I would find small signs of her presence, a teacup shifted from where I'd left it, the blanket folded when I knew I hadn't touched it, a mirror fogged with a trace of shapes that looked like hands pressed against the glass. It should have unsettled me, but instead I began to smile at these things, because they were her. Evelyn. The ghost who was no longer just a whisper in the dark, but someone who was starting to feel more real than most living people I'd known. At night we talked endlessly. I would curl beneath the covers and speak into the shadows as if the shadows themselves carried her body, and she would respond, her voice growing steadier each time. I learned that she loved music, that in her life she would play piano whenever she could, though she never let anyone hear her. She told me she once stood by the window watching women walk by, wondering what it would be like to reach for their hand without shame. Her confessions cut me deeply, because I knew that ache. I knew what it was to hide, to bury love in silence. I told her about my own heartbreak, about the woman I loved who left me because she was too afraid of what others would say. Evelyn listened without judgment, and when she finally spoke, her words wrapped around me like a balm. "She didn't deserve your love if she couldn't hold it in the light." That simple sentence made me cry harder than I had in months. She didn't have to see me to know my heart, and that kind of knowing was rare. Our connection grew until it became more than just comfort. It became longing. There were nights when I reached out into the empty space beside me and swore I felt the faint brush of her fingers, the suggestion of warmth where no body should be. Each time it happened, I whispered her name into the dark, and each time she answered with a tenderness that made me ache. I wasn't just healing from heartbreak, I was falling into something new, something terrifying and beautiful. Evelyn admitted one night, her voice softer than a sigh, that she had never known love in her lifetime. She had dreamed of it, yes, but she had died before ever holding another woman the way she wanted. Her voice trembled as she confessed this, and I could hear the years of loneliness behind it. "I don't want to fade without ever knowing what it feels like," she whispered. I pressed my hand against the sheets, wishing she could feel it, wishing I could close the distance between us. "You do know," I whispered back. "You know now." For a long time, there was silence. Then the warmth came again, a rush of air that wrapped around me, pulling me into the sensation of being held. I closed my eyes and let myself sink into it, because even if my mind screamed that it was impossible, my heart told me it was the truest thing I had ever felt. We laughed together too, as strange as that sounded. Sometimes she teased me about the way I talked to myself in the kitchen, or the way I sang badly when I thought no one could hear. And when I teased her back, The air shimmered with a sound that might have been her laughter, light and playful, a sound that didn't belong to the dead. Every night I wanted her closer. Every night I wanted her touch to last longer. And yet, beneath the sweetness of it, there was a shadow. Evelyn began to grow quiet at times, her voice weaker, fading in and out like she was slipping away. I would panic when that happened, whispering her name over and over until she returned. Finally, she told me the truth. "I'm not meant to stay here," she said, her tone heavy with sorrow. "Being with you holds me, but it also binds me. The more I love you, the weaker I become." My chest tightened painfully. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down I knew she was right. Ghosts weren't meant to linger in the world of the living. Still, the thought of letting her go shattered me. "I can't lose you," I whispered desperately. The air grew warmer, brushing against me like a kiss that barely touched my lips. "Then don't. Let's love each other while we can." Her words were both a promise and a warning, and I clung to them like a lifeline. That night, as I lay in the silence that wasn't truly silent, I realized I was no longer afraid of what this meant. I was in love with Evelyn. Not with the idea of her, not with the comfort she gave me, but with her, the woman who had been denied love and life but had found it in death. And I was willing to risk whatever came after just to keep her with me a little longer. The house began to change as if it, too, was responding to what was happening between us. The air grew colder at odd hours, doors rattled even when the wind was still, and sometimes the lights flickered so violently I thought the bulbs might burst. Neighbors started to whisper when they saw me on the porch. An older woman from across the street stopped one morning and told me in a hushed voice that the house had a history, that people never stayed there long because they felt something pulling at them, something that didn't want to let go. I smiled politely, but inside I knew exactly what she was talking about. I wasn't being pulled by something dark. I was being held by Evelyn. But even as I told myself that, there were nights when the atmosphere grew heavier than I could bear. I would be lying in bed with her voice soft in my ear, and suddenly the room would shudder with a cold so sharp it hurt to breathe. Shadows crept along the walls like ink spreading in water. I clutched the blankets and whispered her name, and she would answer, but weaker, as if fighting against something unseen. Those nights scared me in a way she never did. They made me realize that her being here was not simple, not safe. One evening, as the storm outside battered against the windows, I sat in the living room with the lights flickering and my heart pounding. "Evelyn," I whispered, voice trembling. "Tell me the truth. What's happening to you?" The silence stretched unbearably until she spoke, her words heavy with sorrow. "The more I stay with you, the harder it becomes. Love ties me here, but it also drains me. I don't belong to this world anymore." My chest tightened so painfully I had to hold my ribs. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to imagine life without her. "Then don't go," I pleaded. "Stay with me. We'll figure it out." The room grew colder, and I felt the faint brush of her hand against mine, desperate and trembling. "I want to," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I want to more than anything. But every moment I stay, I feel myself unraveling. And if I unravel too far, I'll become something neither of us can bear." Fear slid through me like ice. I had read stories of spirits turning angry, turning into shadows of themselves when they clung too tightly to what they couldn't have. I didn't want that for her. I didn't want her love to turn into torment. But the thought of losing her, of returning to a bed that was truly empty, was unbearable. "I can't let you go," I said, my voice cracking. "You're the only thing that's made me feel alive again." The room pulsed with warmth, sudden and overwhelming, wrapping around me like arms pulling me close. Her voice trembled as she answered, "And you're the only one who's made me feel alive at all." Tears blurred my vision as I pressed my face into the pillow, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. That night, the storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside me. Thunder shook the house, and with each crash, the walls groaned as if straining under some invisible weight. But even in the chaos, Evelyn stayed by me, her presence strong, holding me as tightly as she could. I realized then that love was no longer enough to save us. Love was the very thing threatening to tear her apart. And yet, even knowing that, I couldn't let go. I clung to her with everything I had, convincing myself that love could conquer even death, even the laws of the universe. When the storm finally broke, leaving the night silent and soaked with rain, Evelyn whispered one last thing before I drifted into restless sleep. "If you keep me here, you may lose me forever. You have to choose." Her words echoed in my mind long after her voice faded. I knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. I had found love in the most impossible place, and now I was being asked to decide between keeping her close and letting her go. And the cruelest part was that either choice meant breaking my own heart. The nights began to feel more fragile, as though each one could be the last. Evelyn's voice wavered more often now, flickering in and out like a candle caught in the wind. Sometimes I would call for her in the dark and wait so long in silence that panic would rise in my chest, only to finally hear her whisper back, faint but steady, "I'm here." Those two words became everything to me. I lived for them, clung to them, because I knew they might not always come. That knowledge made every moment between us heavier, sharper, as though we were both aware of time running out. I found myself memorizing the way her presence felt, the way the air warmed when she brushed against me, the faint dip in the bed when she tried to lie beside me. I held on to these sensations the way someone might clutch photographs of a loved one, proof, memory, love pressed into the smallest details. One night, after a long silence, Evelyn spoke with a weight I had never heard in her voice before. If I had lived in another time, maybe I could have loved without fear. My throat closed. I whispered her name, but she continued, her words trembling. "When I was alive, I wanted to love women the way I loved in secret. I wanted to walk with her in the sunlight, to dance without hiding, to sleep without shame. But I was too afraid. I buried my heart in silence, and then it was too late. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, because I understood. I knew that ache. I had lived it in my own way, holding back pieces of myself for people who wouldn't hold me fully. You have that love now," I whispered, voice breaking. "Even if it came too late, you have it." The air shimmered with warmth, brushing against my lips like the softest kiss, so light I almost doubted it, but my heart knew it was real. That night was different. Evelyn's presence wrapped around me more fully than ever before, her warmth pressing against me as though she was fighting to become real just for me. My body trembled, not with fear, but with longing so deep it burned. I whispered her name like a vow, over and over, as though speaking it could hold her here. "I love you," I said, the words spilling from me without hesitation. For a long moment there was silence, and then she answered, her voice breaking, "And I love you. More than I thought I ever could." What followed wasn't like anything I could explain to another soul. It was as though her spirit poured itself into me, her presence thick and warm, her touch almost physical. I felt her hand against my cheek, her body curling against mine, the weight of her settling into the bed as if she were flesh and blood. My heart raced, my breath caught, but I didn't pull away. I held her, or maybe she held me, and for the first time she wasn't just a whisper or a shadow, she was real enough to make me believe love could break every rule the world had set. It was tender, desperate, filled with the ache of years she had been denied. And when it was over, when the night grew still again, I lay there trembling with the knowledge that she had given me everything she had left to give. but I could feel the cost. She was weaker after that night, her voice faint when she finally spoke again. Every moment I stay, I fade faster, she whispered. I don't want to leave you, but I can't hold on forever. My chest ached so sharply I thought it might shatter. I pressed my face into the pillow, whispering back, then don't leave. Stay with me until you can't anymore. She hesitated, then answered, if you love me, will you let me go? The words cut deeper than any wound I had ever felt. I wanted to scream no, to hold on to her with everything I had, but I couldn't ignore the truth in her voice. Real love wasn't chains. Real love was freedom, even if it meant breaking myself to give it. I couldn't answer her that night. I lay there in the dark with her warmth faint around me, clinging to what remained, praying for more time, even as I knew our time was running out. The choice hung over me like a storm cloud that refused to move. Every night I felt Evelyn closer to slipping away, her voice fainter, her warmth thinner, her presence like a thread stretched too far. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend that if I held her name on my lips and kept whispering into the darkness, she would remain forever. But love is cruel when it demands honesty, and honesty told me she was unraveling. I spent my days restless, unable to focus on anything but the thought of losing her. I would touch the sheets during the day, hoping to feel the weight of her, only to be met with emptiness. At night, when she came, I tried to soak in every second, the soft pressure of her beside me, the faintest caress across my cheek, the way her presence wrapped around me like a blanket against the cold. I whispered every story of my heart to her, every piece of love I had, as if pouring myself into her could keep her from fading. But she was slipping, and we both knew it. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, I finally asked the question I had been avoiding. My voice shook as I said it. If I let you go, where will you go? The silence that followed was unbearable. When she finally spoke, her words were gentle, like the brush of a feather across my skin. I don't know. But I know I won't feel trapped anymore. I'll be free. My throat closed. The selfish part of me screamed that freedom meant losing her, that freedom meant this house would go silent again, that I would return to an empty bed and an emptier life. But beneath my selfishness was love, and love told me that keeping her chained here would be cruelty, even if it kept me whole. Tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered, I don't know if I can do it. Her voice wavered, softer than ever. You can. Because you love me. That night we held each other as best as we could, the boundaries of life and death bending just enough for us to feel one another in ways that words could never explain. She curled against me, her warmth pressing into my chest, her voice humming softly in my ear. I clutched her as though my arms could anchor her to this world, but deep inside I knew it wasn't mine to decide. She was tired. She deserved peace. Dawn crept slowly across the horizon, the first rays of light slipping through the curtains. I felt her growing weaker in my arms, her presence dissolving like mist in the morning sun. My heart raced in panic, but I forced myself to speak through the sobs building in my throat. Evelyn. I love you. And because I love you, I'll let you go. The air grew still, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Then came her voice, broken but filled with a kind of peace I had never heard before. Thank you. You gave me what I never had in life. You loved me without fear. My tears soaked the pillow as I whispered, always. You'll always be mine, no matter where you go. For a moment, everything felt impossibly real, her arms around me, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss so tender it shattered me. And then, slowly, the warmth faded. The bed grew lighter. The air grew still. I clung to the sheets, begging for her to stay, but she was gone. The silence that followed was the heaviest I had ever known. I lay there for hours, broken, staring at the ceiling with tears drying on my cheeks. Yet beneath the ache, something strange bloomed inside me. She was gone, yes, but she hadn't left me empty. She had filled me with something no one else ever had. She had shown me that love didn't have to live in fear. She had given me the courage to believe in it again. The days after were hard. The house felt quieter, heavier, but not in the same way it had before. It wasn't haunted anymore. It was blessed, touched by something sacred. Sometimes at night, when I closed my eyes, I swore I still felt the faintest dip in the bed beside me, the whisper of her name brushing against my ear. Maybe it was memory, maybe it was wishful thinking, but I chose to believe it was her reminding me that she hadn't left completely. She had simply moved somewhere my eyes couldn't follow. I whispered into the empty room, my voice steady though my heart trembled. You'll always be in my bed, Evelyn. Always in my heart. And though the room gave no reply, a single tear slid down my cheek, warm as her touch had been, and I knew she heard me. I knew she was free. And I knew that love, once born, never truly dies. It only changes form. It only lingers, like the scent of roses in a house where no flowers bloom.